My real job this morning is to close us in prayer, and I will do that in just a second. I always try to take seriously what David says to me, and so he said, if you feel like there's something that you should say, you have the last word. So there is something that I think we need to consider real quick before we move from this place, and it has everything to do with what you've heard this morning about Don. A couple of Sunday mornings ago, I skipped Sunday school to go see Don and Jean. It was just a couple days after Don went to hospice, and I had been out of town until Saturday night, so I wanted to go see them as soon as I can, and I told them that I came to bring my Sunday school records, and that's because Jean always did those, and when Jean was gone, Don always did those, so they both got a little chuckle out of that. But one of the main reasons that I wanted to go and see them was to tell both of them how much I admired them. And I wanted to specifically spend a couple of minutes with Don and try to ask him to think about something. And I suspected that it was something he didn't really want to think about and something he didn't want to talk about even more. But I wanted to get him thinking about all the people's lives that he had touched. And you've heard about Tapestry. Nobody yet talked about Awana, but for years and years, Don and Hilda were one of the driving forces behind our Awana program in this church, and there's no telling how many kids that will benefit for their whole lives. And I also suspected that Don hadn't thought about this, and I'm pretty sure that he tried not to, but I also asked him to think about all the kids' lives that he touched, the years that he was teaching at Simpson School, the years that he was a constant picture of Christ for them, even when they didn't know that's who they were seeing. There's no way to know how many kids grew up in that school thinking, I want to be like Mr. Stegner when I grew up. Maybe some of them said, I want to be a good teacher like Mr. Stegner when I grew up. Maybe some of them said, I want to be an artist like Mr. Stegner when I grow up. We'll never know that, but I suspect that we all have a pretty good idea from the few lives that we've heard testimony of today that Don touched, that there's probably truth in every aspect of that. So I think the takeaway for us this morning is we need to not take for granted the things that we do because there are people watching. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, will they see the kind of example from us that we've all seen in Don's life or not? So with that, would you allow me to pray on your behalf? Dear God, what a blessing it's been to be together and reflect on the amazing things that you've done in our lives because we got to spend time with Don and because Don was willing to be a reflector of your light. And God, we are thankful that we have evidence of that, not only in our own lives, but we've heard that shared from other people's lives. And in the days and weeks ahead, when we think of Don, I pray that you would help us to be thankful for the picture that Don was of Christ to us. I pray, Lord, that as I in my own life reflect on Don, I'll remember that for more than 25 years, for a young man that originally came into this church, whose father had been gone for a number of years, that Don was always a picture for me of what a godly man looked like. And so, God, we just want to thank you for the impact that you have had on our lives through Don because he was willing to be that conduit for us. God, we pray for Hilda and the family. We pray for the great memories that they're going to have going forward. And as the sting of loss gets a little bit less each day, we just pray that you would help them to focus on those many wonderful memories that they have, that we've heard from them today. Help them to hold that closely in their hearts and help them to remember what Don's priorities were and the example that he was for them.